Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Utility City Commission meeting of November 29th, 2022. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
I will. Mayor Betty Rush,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes,
Here.
Commissioner Ronaldo Diaz.
Here.
Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Stokes, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor, you're muted.
Are there any additions, deletions, or reordering for the agenda?
I have none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Then can we approve, do we have to approve the agenda as it is? I don't think so. Okay.
No, only.
Okay, now we have the approval of minutes from the October 25th, 2022 meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
All right, we skipped over public participation of non-agenda and consent items.
No, I think I asked about it. Okay,
That was
I
the
thought,
initial.
Participation?
do you have any cards, madam? Anybody?
I just received one, so we have one. We have some people in the room.
Oh,
Si
okay,
quiere hablar o algo.
okay.
Si
What?
se quiere hablar, hay tarjetas.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Mr. McBoy.
We have some possible Spanish speakers that might want to speak. But we have one who's ready to rock and roll. If you would like to entertain that, or if you would like me to
Sure,
do
no, of
that.
course, yeah, that's the time to do it. Sorry about that. So public participation of non-agenda items. The clerk has none, but apparently we have some in the audience so that we can hear from. Thank you. Mr. McBoy, would you call them up?
Yes, Ms. Peggy Fisher. And if there, yeah, it looks like we have several people who would like to speak, and they are going for blue cards as we speak.
Okay.
Nombre, dirección y public participation is sufficient. You have the floor. Oops.
Peggy Fisher, 508 North 8th Street. I saw the sign on the doors of the annex building notifying residents that the utilities department customer service is moving effective tomorrow. One thing that has been mentioned by a number of people on social media and conversations is, where do we put the payments that we bring up or in drop now in the Dropbox at the annex? Do we still put them at that Dropbox in the annex?
Yes, I know the answer to that. That's been, hi Peggy. That's been asked online and I checked with Mr. Liberty and we're still using the old Dropbox. That has not changed. They'll
Well,
pick
I
stuff
think
up there.
it'd be a good idea to put that on the door, put
Sure.
that out to the public, because
Okay.
people, you knowing Mayor is great, but for those of us who do drop off our payments, it would be good to know. So thank you.
Hey Peggy, I put it on Facebook. Isn't that enough? Yes, we'll have a sign on the door. Thank you very much.
Yes, that's enough.
Thank you. Next up.
Do we have some other people who would like to speak publicly? Que quieren hablar?
I hope they bring interpreters. Oh,
I saw some movement toward blue cards. Is anybody looking to speak?
no? Okay, maybe they have for items on the agenda.
Sí, se puede.
Para el frente.
Ed's helping us out. Ed has many talents.
Español.
Sí, se puede hacer en español y traducir.
Okay, who's gonna,
Un poco despacio, entonces.
did he bring, excuse me, did he bring an interpreter?
No, but between Ed and I, I'm sure we can cover it. Ed's already on it.
Yeah.
And we got lots.
Sí, tengo una pregunta de que, aparte,
Si puede dar su nombre y su dirección.
ok, mi nombre mío es Abelino Nolasco, en el 526 SC Street Lakewood. Estaba haciendo una pregunta acerca de los biles, han cambiado, han llegado muy caro, y entonces eso quería saber por qué, y de las taxas también saber. Porque este año me aumentaron casi, del año pasado pagué 3,000 y algo, y este año he pagado 5,000, casi 5,300. Entonces quería saber por qué tan.
¿Y qué fue que aumentó?
Ha aumentado un poco de las taxas, llegó a 5,300 apenas este año. El año pasado pagué 3,300.
Los impuestos.
Sí,
Impuestos
Sí.
de propiedad.
sí. Eso y el otro de los biles de la luz que han subido mucho también, quería saber. Me han llegado de 600 y la primera vez que me llegó, yo fui a preguntar a la oficina y ellos me dijeron que era doble
I think
mes.
excuse me, I'm going to stop. When I am in court and we are interpreting, they do a sentence at a time. Because otherwise it becomes a synopsis. So if we're going to have Spanish speaking people and translating, I would ask that it be done correctly so that at the end of each sentence, we know what's going on. If you could do
Okay.
that.
I can do that. So far, he's asked, he has concerns over the rise in property taxes and also in his light bill and electricity, and he came here to find out and learn more about why. Y eso lo dijo que si puedes hablar como un poco por poco para que podamos traducir qué estás diciendo con detalle.
Ok,
Sí.
está bien. Le voy a hablar primero lo de la luz.
Sí.
Hace como 6 meses atrás, los biles me aumentaron.
So for the last 6 months, his electric bills have been rising.
Entonces quería saber por qué motivo.
So he wants to know why. So el repuesto de eso es que tenemos, este año era bien difícil para nosotros y para operar la luz. Y el gran problema es generación de esa electricidad. Usamos petróleo, gas, diferentes, varias cosas, y con la subida de gasolina y fuel y todo eso, nosotros tenemos que recuperar ese precio también. Entonces, por
Excuse me,
ahora.
Mr.
Okay, yeah.
Mr. Diaz, I don't understand anything you're saying.
Yeah, Mr. Diaz, this is really not an question answer session. I would
Okay.
like his, what he says to be translated. And if there's
Okay.
a brief response, that's fine, like I just did with Ms. Fisher, but it's
Yeah,
not,
Yeah, I was given a brief response just saying that rising fuel costs equals rising electricity.
Mhm.
So si quieres, yeah,
Dejar un número de teléfono en su tarjeta.
yeah.
and maybe he can call you for an explanation or something.
Está bien. Una pregunta más que tenía es acerca de las taxas de este año que han aumentado mucho. Quería saber por qué tanto, porque la casa, yo apenas pasé a vivir hace dos años, va a ser ahora el 28 de mayo.
Okay, so he's asking about the property taxes again, so I'll answer briefly. Como un ciudad no tenemos mucho control en el precio de los impuestos, pero también este momento no es, normalmente no tenemos respuestas para preguntas. Entonces, si tú quieres dejar tu número en tu teléfono, una tarjeta azul con Vice Mayor McVoy y podemos seguir con respuesta, ¿ok?
Está bien, gracias.
So I just said, leave his number on a card and we can have someone follow up with him to answer his questions.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand the language barrier, but I don't think we should sort of waive the big
Yeah.
rule. Anybody else coming up with a blue card?
Any other public participation?
Calling once? That's,
I
There we
didn't fill
go.
out.
You didn't fill out
I didn't fill it out. I was,
If you can do it out, okay, with me, but if you could give your name and your address.
yes, my name is Rajendra Rampersad. I live at 861 West Calmia Drive in Lake Park, Florida. We are just
I'm
out
s-
here introducing ourselves. We're Meraki, a zero down solar company. And we're in the neighborhood to actually help out with high electricity cost for the people of Worth. And we just want to come out and introduce ourselves. We are a local company. We've been in business for 10 years. And we've been here.
Good. If you'd like to leave your card or some information, that sounds fine.
Yes.
You may also want to get in touch with the SELF program, SELF, through our utility. And be aware of their presence here. They do different things than what you do, but it's related.
Okay.
And feel free to be in touch with Director Ed Liberty, who's there.
Okay.
Is Director of the Electric Utility.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right, I think we're set. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So now we have the consent agenda. No, consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to new business. The first up is A, which is the agreement with Amici Engineering regarding the 2-inch water main replacement. Oh, that was the consent agenda. Agreement with Utility Service Company, Inc. for elevated water tanks maintenance services. Mr. Liberty.
No.
No, Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields, oh, it's water. I'm sorry.
No problem. This is our routine maintenance contract that we execute every 10 years. We put in place a 10-year contract. Utility Service Company was selected as the best value for the city by the selection committee and procurement. The contract is front loaded so that we get both elevated tanks painted in the first 2 years. So the tank, which is called the local elevated water tank, which is at the water plant at I-95 and 6th Avenue South, that will be the first one done. Within your packet, you'll see there's a rendering of one proposed solution of what the logo would look like on the tank, which would be the city logo behind you, the dais, or behind Shayla on her screen. And that is one tentative solution, which is already in the cost, baked in about $19,000 and change. Now, you as the policy board obviously will have the choice of what you would like to see up on the elevated tanks. So at some point, we expect some discussion and some direction.
Okay.
How soon do you need that?
Fairly soon, in that we'd like to get the first tank painted in the winter time of 2023 during the lower humidity, lower temperature times of year, which is the best time to paint elevated steel structures.
And would that be the one that we see in the by 6th Avenue South or the one in the north?
The one at the water plant would be done first.
Okay.
And then the north tank will be done a year later, which keeps them on their 10-year cycle.
Right. Yeah, I know. I drive by there so often. We all do. Sometimes I think, well, it would be kind of fun to have something a little bit different, up there, like make it look a little bit different, more outstanding. But that I think is a conversation that do we have like a little while to talk about that, Mr. Shields?
A little while, I would say 1 to 2 months. So we'll bring
Okay,
it back.
that's fine.
to the utility meeting, but prior to that, maybe take some suggestions from commissioners as to what you would envision the tank looking like. We have to be careful. Again, it's done by a contractor and there are limitations on what can be done, the number of colors and all that does increase the price.
Okay,
I
thank you.
I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Is the logo going to be painted, or is the water tower going to be painted and then the logo will be a decal?
No, the water tank, which is the tower, is called the local. That's called the local elevated water storage tank. And then
Right.
there's the north storage tank, which is up by the ball fields on 22nd.
I think, so you're painting the whole.
No. My question is, are we painting the towers and then putting a decal as the logo, or is that actual paint? The
It's
decal?
actual paint. No, it's painted with they put a template together and then painted the 4 or 5 different colors that are encompassing the city logo, if the city logo was chosen.
Okay, thank you. Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Next.
you all. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
I do have
Now,
I'm super excited because when I first came on, Mr. Shield pointed out that we're gonna paint these soon, and I'm like, it's finally happening. They're really excited. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have B, which is the Demand Response Program Consulting Support. I believe this is Mr. Liberty.
Yes, it is, Madam Mayor. We'll go through the items. I do have some things I want to bring up at the end, just operational updates that the commission should be aware of, but we'll do that at the end of the meeting. In regards to demand response, this is a program that may provide some benefit for us in helping to reduce peak demand on our system. It's a technology that allows us to remotely turn off, if you will, certain pieces of equipment at a customer's home, of course, with prior permission by the customer. What we need to do is determine what technology is best used for this function by us, how many customers we could perhaps enroll in the process, and how much load we could potentially reduce. So we need to put all of that together so we have a roadmap for how to proceed. At this point, we're not familiar enough with the technology to pick a vendor and begin doing installations. The integrated resource plan, which we're going to be talking about more next week, does identify this as a technology that we could use, but it looks at it on a very, very high level basis, purely from an economic point of view. And that shows it as being viable still a few years into the future before we would need to do it. However, there are some short-term operational needs that may be satisfied with this technology. So we want to bring this forward and get this going. The price is just under $50,000. We did solicit multiple proposals and found that this company, Quanta Technology, provided us with the best response in terms of identifying our needs going forward.
Thank you.
And
Well, let's have a motion a second before we discuss. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, this is Glenn, we can discuss. Thank you. Mr. McBoy?
yes, I think we're all on the commission extremely aware that there's a lot of attention in the community to electric rate increases, the price of electricity, the size of people's bills, and nobody is complaining that they're too small or that the cost is too low. I think part of what we want to make sure that everybody is aware is that our commission is very much taking what I call an all of the above approach to looking for ways to try to help reduce customers' costs as much as possible. And something that works for one person may not work for the next household. Other things work for other households. So that's why it's important to have a number of different routes that we're going. And demand response is a nationally recognized approach that's been around for quite a while that recognizes that the cost to utilities of power can vary with time of day, can vary with load. And sometimes it can help out to be able to back off the need in the community at certain times a little bit. And so typically utilities will let people voluntarily sign up for the program. Hey, we'll back off certain things that, like the most obvious example is a water heater. If we turn off your water heater for an hour, for 2 hours, for 4 hours, you'll never notice the difference. It'll coast in terms of the temperature. It's a very minor change. And so if we pay you enough for that privilege to be able to back off a little on our load, that can help the community as well as the individual consumer. Do we have the consultants available for questions? Are they on the call?
I don't believe they're on the call. No, not tonight. We would normally not have a vendor on a call for questions, but I can try to answer your questions if you have them.
Yeah, I do. I have a number of questions for it because, I think we made a statement when we agreed to raise the rates in July that we really wanted to push hard on things that would give customers options for lowering their bills. And so what I just said, I think we're serious about that, want to do it. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible. Are you aware of any example of demand response programs that Quanta has already implemented?
Off the top of my head, no, I'm not. I'd have to go back and look at their literature to find. But we've talked about it and they've gotten members of their team that have been involved with projects in the past.
Okay, I guess.
And I believe are currently working with other customers on demand response.
So I think before we signed on, it would be appropriate to find out, what other programs have they gotten going and get a little information about those programs. What percentage of the total load for us? We conveniently, our total load is roughly 100 megawatts. So it's easy to do percentages. If we can knock off 5 megawatts, it's a 5% improvement. Doesn't sound like much, but that's actually a pretty big deal. We might be able to do better. So it'd be useful to know how successful were they at doing it in other locations. I have several questions here. Maybe you want to make a note of them to pass them on.
Well, actually, if you could just, you can certainly pass them on to me by email. If I had known ahead of time, we would have had them here to discuss these and answer the questions. But Quanta Technology is a well-known entity in the energy consulting business and specifically in demand response and in AMI technologies and a number of other things. So they've certainly done these types of things before. I would want to caution people not to assume that there's some big rating decreases are coming because of this. Let's go back to the fundamentals of demand response for the folks that may not be aware of it. The concept of demand response is to use a device to interrupt power flow into a location. Typically, when you look at residential demand response, you're talking about the hot water heater, the air conditioning, and perhaps the pool pump. Those are the three big items that are most readily accepted as demand response capable. The basic premise is that before you build a megawatt of capacity, meaning buy another megawatt of capacity to make power, that you instead find a way to invest the same amount of money or perhaps less money to create a megawatt with an N instead of a megawatt with an M, right? So what you're doing is you're attempting to create the same outcome in terms of energy reliability without actually having to build more megawatts to do it, but you do have to pay for it. So while this seems like a good idea, and it certainly is a good idea to try to restrict demand going forward, it requires customers to sign up on a voluntary basis who are then paid to do that. So unlike the federal government, we don't have a printing machine here that makes money. The payment to that customer comes from the other customers. So while you may be able to buy capacity a little bit lower price than otherwise you would have spent building, which is why you would look at demand response, you're not going to get huge gains in savings because the dollars are just going to go to a different place, albeit they do stay in the utility service territory, which means in the community. There are some benefits from the standpoint of environmental because you're in theory reducing a dirtier resource during peak times and replacing with a resource that's not using anything. However, we talk about, for example, the pool pump or the hot water heater, the air conditioner, the energy that premise required when it was interrupted, it's going to then use at a later point in time. Maybe not the hot water heater, right? But probably the pool pump is just going to come on a little bit later or still has to run. The temperature in the home, if you allow the temperature to go up, 1, 2, or 3 degrees, whatever the particular parameter is, you're going to have to bring that space back down to the desired temperature. So you're shifting the energy use one period to the other. Now, if, for example, the homeowner doesn't need the temperature to come back down, then of course you've avoided that energy use completely. What's unknown to us for this geographic area, we know, for example, our neighboring utility uses this technology. We can extrapolate based on what percentage of customers they've been able to sign up, which is public information, what we could likely expect here. We know their pricing because it's not secret. So we need to determine just how much we could potentially capture here, recognizing though that we have a very, very large population of tenants who may not be in a position to elect to have this equipment installed in the home that they rent. But we do have a large population of owners of properties who might elect to have that done. So we need to figure that out. I don't think that's a huge task, but we need to estimate, well, how many megawatts could we possibly get? Probably the biggest thing is to pick what technology are we going to use? How are we going to communicate with these devices in the home? Are we going to do it by talking to the thermostat that then talks to the other devices? Are we going to use a radio frequency device that's installed specifically on the air conditioning compressor or on the pool pump? How is that going to happen? What's the most cost-effective way to do it? and have it work reliably. We also need to figure out, for example, if you want to have let's just pick an easy number, 5 megawatts of demand reduction. How many systems would you need to install such that at any given point in time, you use the mouse, you click in the control room, right? To get that 5 megawatts of demand reduction, how many would you have had to install to actually get 5 megawatts of reduction? Is that 6 megawatts, 7 megawatts, 8 megawatts, 10 megawatts? I don't know what that number is, but we need guidance on that. And then to figure out how to actually roll it out. So there's a number of steps that have to happen early on. This company could help us identify, and their task will be to help us identify how we're going to do that. What will the cost be? Should there be a phase 2? My presumption is that there would be a phase 2, which would be to actually help us write the RFP to purchase the equipment and have it installed in customers' homes, but also help us develop what the payment structures, actually the payment structures would probably come in the first phase. What would the economics have to look like? So how much will people need to be paid in order to induce them to sign up for the program? Because it's purely voluntary. And then we have to understand how sticky is it? I mean, if a customer signs up in year 1, after they've experienced some interruptions, will they still want to be on the program in years 2, 3, and 4? Which is important to know because by that point, you've already deployed the capital technology into their homes to do this. And they then subsequently change their minds. That capital is in theory stranded unless some subsequent owner wants to use it. So we have to think all of that through. Phase 3, which I presume there will be a phase 3, would involve then helping us project manage the installation. So to make sure that we hire the right installation contractors. I don't envision that this company would be the company actually doing the installations. We would probably outsource that to mechanical or electrical contractors to do the installation. So there's multiple phases to this. When I mentioned that we had multiple bids, technically for the first phase is under $50,000, we could have proceeded in one way. But when we looked at the total cost of the program, we said, we ought to bid this, get multiple bids, and we did, and then pick the company that we think will do the best job. I may not have the specific answers to where they've actually done the demand response program, but I know that they have done them, and we can get you that information.
That's helpful. One thought on the couple thoughts in relation to that. If one were to throttle back on AC, and it's important when you mentioned that the idea of demand response is that you can turn off remotely the power going into a building. Obviously, that's not quite exactly what you meant. What you meant is that you can remotely turn off certain equipment that's equipped with the control.
You're correct. Oh, no, yeah, we would never turn off the whole house. No,
Right, just to be
no,
clear. for
no.
people.
It's those specific devices are the ones that are most normally targeted in demand response programs, especially here in Florida.
Right. And one thought, you mentioned that sometimes it's just shifting the use of the power to a different time. That in itself, as we all know, the state of California, for instance, is implementing time of use rates throughout the state. And as the fourth largest economy in the world, it's worth looking to see what they're doing, see if we can learn things from it. So one thing that we will want to ask Quanta is, have they had any experience or have they any suggestions on would it make sense to combine a demand response program with a time of use rate structure? Because both of them are going in the same direction, that the cost to us of electricity is not the same at different times. Coming back to the AC, we know that the temperature varies during the course of the day and the evening here. So if you can throttle it back during peak usage when everybody wants juice and have that cooling down happen when the outside temperature is already cooled some, you will in fact have a net energy saving as well with that.
So
So there's potential there.
a few comments on that point. Number one is our wholesale power rates, the price that we pay for wholesale power, are not time-based. They're not time of use based. To the extent that the rates change within the contract, it has to do with how much load we have at any given point in time, whether we're at base or intermediate or peaking, but they're not based on a time of day. I believe we already have a time of use rate that nobody has signed up for in the past. We could certainly take a look at that with our rates consultants. I wouldn't necessarily need to do that with Quanta. We do have a rates consultant that could take a look at time of use rates for us and advise us on how we might adjust our time of use rate. typically what happens in residential time of use is that very few customers want that because you pay a premium during peak hours, a significant premium during peak hours in exchange for a much lower rate during the off-peak hours. And very, very few customers, after experiencing the premium they pay during peak hours, want to stay on that rate after.
Again, the fourth largest economy in the world is implementing it statewide.
Yes, they are.
If they are, there's probably a very good reason that they're doing it.
And they have a very, very different market structure in California than we do here. I'm not saying it wouldn't work here. We've had a time of use rate that I'm aware of. Nobody has signed up for.
Well,
But we
also
could certainly,
advertise it. Nobody in the community knows that we haven't, but
oh, it's all in our published rates. It's all there. But we'll recheck that just to make sure I'm not wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure we have it.
let's.
Okay,
may
we're
be
going,
wrong.
excuse me, we're going a little far afield of the item that we're here to vote on. I'm sure this is
ac-
interesting discussion, but
Madam Mayor, this
Yes.
is all. In terms of selecting a consultant, we need to know that what we're doing is, if we're paying, Madam Mayor, with all due respect, we had some concerns about spending 30,000 on a study to understand some things in our community. Here, we're spending 50, and I want to make sure that the objective is, how can we design this system to work the best, to give the most benefit to our customers in the community? And
yes, and it seems, go ahead.
So it's been seen in other places that sometimes combining the demand response and time of use rates are things to think about. So that would be a question for Quanta. Have they had any experience with that? Another one, in other words, can
Are
we
you,
get?
let me stop you, because really, we've been on this a really long time. Are you questioning the qualifications of Quanta? Are you not wanting to vote for it for that reason? I just need to know where we're going.
I have not enough information to know anything about this consultant or any of the other ones to make an informed opinion about that. I have some clear things that are relevant pieces of information that would be helpful to know. Our objective as policymakers is to make sure that we are getting the best for our customers possible.
Right, of
and-
course.
So our objectives are aligned because we have the
Yeah,
same.
I don't understand. Yeah,
If
I
we had
mean-
kno- if staff had known that you had these concerns or questions ahead of time, we would have certainly had them here to
Right.
answer all those questions in detail.
right. So I'm, we have a motion, we have a second. We have a pretty big agenda. I understand that you have questions. But I think that would be a conversation, a more lengthy conversation. I don't want to get to a workshop situation on the second agenda item on the agenda tonight.
I have a couple more questions and then we can move to something
Well,
else.
they're not,
for Ed to have them.
are they not something that you could talk to Ed privately about and ask him?
I think there are things that we all, as a community, as the policymakers, need to be thinking about and be aware as we move forward with these programs. We're spending.
All right,
customers'
so
money.
why don't you ask the questions then, and let's keep moving on.
Okay, as we certainly know from previous commission meetings, the community has expressed a lot of interest in community solar. So one question for Quanta would be, have they had any experience designing or implementing community solar tariff programs? And has some relevance to what we're doing, or any other rate structures that encourage community side assets in the process. And a big one that comes with demand response program is, are they looking to design a program that encourages community investment in behind the meter storage, which clearly is coming Tesla, Powerwalls, or whoever else is. Are they, because those two things are definitely related together. A person's interest in demand response, if they have their own on-site storage, goes up considerably. And their ability to contribute. And the similar question with that is, have they had any experience with bidirectional charging for electric vehicles, which again becomes relevant to the demand response and to storage in the community.
So let's take those in pieces, starting from the way back. I know you've referenced bidirectional charging a number of times at past meetings. I can tell you that I'm not aware of any bidirectional charging that's happening in the country other than a limited pilot that's happening in California of about numbers I've saw, maybe 2,500 or 25,000 customers in California. So we've actually explored the concept of purchasing bidirectional equipment. And we've been told by the suppliers that they don't have it ready yet. It doesn't exist. So while there are vehicles that are designed to go that way, there's not commercially available chargers, for example, for charging, where we could do that. So the focus on this has been specifically with regards to the technology that can be installed in people's homes. In community solar is not in the scope of work, and it's not viewed as a demand response technology. And we already have a number of proposals to deploy in community solar under a separate RFP. So we never thought to mix these two together to put community solar into a demand response program. This is purely look at one aspect of a technology, which is to install devices in a home to be able to control the air conditioner, the hot water heater, and the pool pump on demand. And that's it.
Okay, I see that Ms. Malega has her hand up.
Well, that in response, that's exactly.
Okay,
that these concerns need to be raised.
Mr. McBoy, Ms. Malega has had her, you've been on for 10 minutes now. Ms. Malega has a question or a comment.
I just want us to be mindful that anything that's supposed to go past 30 minutes is supposed to go to workshop. We have a motion on the floor, and I would like to move forward with this or move it to workshop.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be moved to workshop, but I want to make sure that as we're designing a program that we're likely to have in place for a minimum of 10 years, that we are looking to the technology that is changing and the climate that is changing, not physical climate, but the policy climate nationwide, that people are looking to combine variable resources. They're looking to combine distributed storage. They're looking to combine.
Yeah, Mr. McBoy, I think, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you and I apologize for that, but I think this is a conversation. Please, Mr. McBoy, I think in the spirit of economics of time, I understand that you have a much more deep understanding of this, and your conversations with Mr. Liberty are illustrative, but we really need to move on with, you can talk to him about that. Either you're going to vote for it or against it. So I would ask someone to call the question.
Okay, with all due respect, Madam Mayor, as policymakers, we should be making the best possible decisions. And this
Yes, I agree with you. And all the questions that you're asking Mr. Liberty right now could have been done prior to the meeting.
No, they
If
are
you had-
questions that I cannot talk to my fellow commissioners about those, and those are things that we all need to be aware of. One piece, as we think about the technology and spending $50,000 to do that, I have the technology sitting on my desk at home. Two pieces of it cost me about $20. I know what the chip is that is used to drive that. The ones for an AC are going to be a little pricier because they're 220, three-phase ones. A water heater, that would work for the thing. This technology and the technologies, there's some issues about what kind of radio communications. Do you want to communicate to your AMI? Do you want to communicate to Wi-Fi? How do you want to do that? Yes, there are some issues, but the bigger issues is how do we incorporate this as part of an overall policy to help reduce customers' bills and our environmental footprint.
Okay,
And
Ms.
that requires a pretty inclusive approach to it. And I want to make sure that Quanta are the kind of people who have experience doing that. Not that somebody says, oh, they're really good at it. I can say I'm really good at soil science, but people are going to ask me, well,
excuse me,
what have you done in
Mr.
soil?
McBoy. Madam Clerk, where are we with time? I've got us at like 17 minutes.
Yeah, you have 7 minutes and 14 seconds left.
I see Ms. Malega's hand is up and also Ms. Davis.
Correct.
We
Ms.
have-
Malega?
As well.
No,
Oh.
go ahead. I'm good.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
good.
sorry, I can't see your light. I'm sorry. Sarah, Ms. Malega, are you gonna? No, okay. Ms. Davis?
Oh, Madam Mayor, I was just going to offer for the sake of the meeting that we certainly welcome Vice Mayor McBoy's questions and what we can do. I've been taking note of the questions and based on if there are other questions from other commissioners, we can take those questions and bring this back as an unfinished business at next meeting with
Okay.
the answers to the questions, and we can compile them so all other commissioners will have.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. because apparently if there's more information, let's go into it. So it'll come back on the next in December. Do we have a meeting in December?
No, we were trying not to have one in December.
Okay. Mr. Liberty, is this something that you're okay with waiting 2 months for?
This was something that was not requested by staff. This was something that was requested by specifically the commissioner. And but so if we want to wait till the end of January meeting, then
All right, well, yeah, because I mean, we're almost.
does not have a pressing need to do this.
Okay, all right. So I would ask that we have consensus to bring it to the January meeting, because obviously we're not getting it done today in 30 minutes.
Right, so we can take the questions as given, and we can bring them back, answers to those questions at the next meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. As usual, you have a reasonable solution. Thank you very much. So the motion maker, will you withdraw the motion? And do a motion to postpone it to, table it till January?
You want to comment?
Yeah, I have a quick question first.
Yep.
I understand all the vice mayor's concerns, but to me, I thought the bulk of them had to do with our rate structure. And like you said, we have a rate consultant. We're going to be talking about another rate structure later on this meeting. I think we'll continue to have conversations about rates, and I'd like to have one conversation about all the different rate structures instead of one at a time. So to me, that feels separate from this.
Okay, so do you want to vote? You want to call the vote?
Question I had was about the bidirectional charging, and because this consultant would be looking at new technologies or what technologies are available and out there, would it be way out of scope for them to look at storage on top of that? Because I imagine that if there's some storage component and we're hitting a demand, being able to draw from that or however that might work might make sense when we're just in the efforts of looking at the technology that's available to us. So that was my biggest question. Was I think I'm happy to move this forward, knowing that we are going to have several more conversations about different rate options, I hope. And then just that one question about the technology.
So in terms of the bidirectional charging, I believe it's a de minimis amount. And I say that because we have 27,600 plus residents and businesses with air conditioners, at least one, right? So let's assume for the moment we have 35 to 40,000 actual separate air conditioners running out there, probably maybe a little bit less than that, hot water heaters, and probably a fraction of that in terms of pools and pool pumps. We have no idea how many electric vehicles are in people's homes that would use this bidirectional charging. In terms of how many customers are actually using the city's chargers, that's about 60 to 65, maybe 55 to 65 customers per month are using the city's chargers. And there is no publicly available bidirectional charger that we can use, that we can buy right now if we wanted to. So bidirectional charging, I think is something that will come way down the road. But frankly, I think we'll be doing demand response long before we get into bidirectional charging. That doesn't mean that there isn't a homeowner out there that has bought an F-150 Lightning truck or some other vehicle that will be able to put power back into their home. But I don't think there's going to be thousands of those compared to air conditioners, hot water heaters, and pool pumps. So again, this is not something that staff asked for. We didn't see that we had a need for this. We were asked to do this. It came up many, many times during the budget process and putting the dollars aside to do this. So these questions are they're certainly not new to us in terms of understanding technology, but we were never asked to include those things in this particular study. It was never contemplated it would. And many of these things can be provided by others. But we'll proceed at the pace that you want us to. As you want us to delay, and have the vendor come in, I'm not opposed to that. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable.
Okay, so does there's a motion, a second. Do we want to amend it to add the bidirectional power to that?
But in all fairness, I can't increase the scope of work for the consultant without asking them to revise their pricing.
Right. Okay. Well, will someone call the question, see how it does, or if the person that made the motion can withdraw it, the seconder can withdraw it, and we can
I can
do
withdraw
what?
So
I'm sorry?
More time. Okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, who is the
And-
second?
Was it Diaz?
Commissioner Diaz.
Okay. Okay, so the motion's gone. It's hard to hear. The motion's gone. So now I need a motion to, I guess, postpone it to the next meeting. So I have a
So-
motion.
I'll move that to allow for additional information to be provided to the commission. We will send questions to Director Liberty and expect answers back from the applicant. And bring that up at the next available meeting.
Okay, thank you. So it'd be for the next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second from
All in
Stone.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, moving along. We have item number C, which is Ninth Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with Vantage Services Consulting. Mr. Liberty?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Vantage Consulting or Vantage is the company that we've been using since 2018 to support us with our wholesale power procurement. When they first came on board, they helped us with a number of tasks that needed to be done, things that I found upon my arrival that not exist here in the utility. But the biggest one that they worked on was preparing what we call the public offering document, or the RFP, if you will, that got us into the new wholesale power agreement, which was sunsetting. So recall that the original OUC agreement was ending at the end of 2018. So we spent a good part of 2018 issuing the RFP and then a very aggressive bid process. Vantage helped us through that process. We did very, very well. Realized over $9 million a year in savings. Was pretty dramatic what we were able to do. We continue to use Vantage. They help us audit the bills monthly as they come in from our wholesale power supplier. They assist us in what we call our all-in cost model. We do own the model. We have copies of it ourselves, although they maintain it, they update it, they load it with information from which we can do our analysis. We do all aspects of future cost forecasting with them. So, for example, they'll look at the costs of natural gas prices out into the future and coal prices, and also our nuclear portfolio and solar prices, and they'll help us anticipate what our prices of energy will be in future years. We do put together a 10-year forward plan every year as a part of our planning process and budgeting process, and they help extensively with that. The dollars that we spend with them, the hourly rate is comparable and competitive with what we pay. For example, our rates consultants, the dollars are comparable in terms of hourly rates. And the amount of time that they spend is completely driven by how many things we ask them to do in any month or any given year. So it's a variable, it's not a fixed number. And I believe the costs have actually been decreasing slightly over the prior years, total costs. So it's a good resource to have in our stable of providers. One of the things that's particularly helpful is in order to have somebody on staff who could actually do what they do, and that would be a pretty expensive employee, and we'd have rather limited ability to give them a succession plan or a path forward. So, and a turnover would really be difficult. So what we like about Vantage and a number of other consultants that we use is that we use them for a few hours a month. We use them when we need them, and we don't pay for them when we don't need them. And that's on a task basis.
Thank you.
So that's the explanation of how Vantage works for us.
Okay, do I have a motion?
We pay them for what
Do I have
we
a
use.
motion? I don't know if you heard. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, so I know we have some public comments.
yes,
Let's-
we have two, Madam Mayor. We have a public comment from Peggy Fisher specifically for this item.
Yeah,
And then we have a public comment that the question is, why have the utility prices skyrocketed? That was probably for public comment, but I think the person only arrived after public comment. So I defer to you how you want to
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that's quite a long and complicated question to ask in, 3 minutes. It's, I mean, and really public comment is not a question, it's a comment. So my suggestion for that, excuse me, my suggestion for that gentleman would be to leave his name and address, and perhaps you or one of the other commissioners, wherever he lives, could respond back to him and have a private conversation with him.
And that's what it is. I'm pretty sure that's the family from the beginning. It should just have his.
No,
contact.
that's a separate one.
That's a separate one.
Okay, but that's my suggestion. We're not going to go into why that's not this agenda item. And even if it was non-agenda item, that's a big question. So my suggestion, whatever commission district he's in, they could respond, or if he wants to contact, me, we can certainly help him with that question, but that God knows we've talked about that on the dais for lots of time. So I would suggest that to the gentleman, and perhaps maybe Mr. McVoy, you could take his information and make sure that someone gets back to him as far as the other one. Yes, let's hear the public comment, and then we can have commission discussion.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Peggy Fisher, 508 North A Street. This is the 6th annual renewal for this particular consultant. It was originally put out to bid back in the 17-18 budget year. And I guess the question is, how often should we be rebidding to consultants rather than just continually rolling over? We've paid them over $1 million over the course of this 5 years we've already paid for, and in 6, including the amount we just paid. So really the question becomes, do we just do this forever for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it may be? Or do we have policies that say at some time frame we should do our due diligence and rebid it? Thank you.
Fisher. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Okay, so is there another card?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
If I can just address that real quick, I just want to,
Sure.
because it is kind of unique that we have a 9th amendment to our contracts.
It's a lot.
But
It's a lot. She agreed.
right, okay, but it's these are professional services, and under our procurement code, professional services can be done through a direct contract based on the unique experience of the consultant. So in this case, this vendor's been vetted through the electric utility from the initial inception of its work on the RFP process and continuing on. They're also the most familiar with our electric utility, and they continue to provide excellent service. Based on that, and the director's desire to continue using them is why they continue to come forward with an amendment. Quite frankly, we could just enter an agreement with them that has an indefinite term and allows for termination, at will by either party. We sometimes do that, but sometimes with these task order based ones, it's good to bring it back to you so you can get an update on who is actually working for the city and who's not. So that's how we've been proceeding with this one.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
just
you very much.
a little background.
No, it's good. It's, knowledge is power. Knowledge is everything. So, any commission comments or questions or discussion? Or can we vote?
I have one question.
Madam Ms. Stokes?
So we have the not to exceed amount. Is that usually pretty accurate, Mr. Liberty? Is it a pretty, almost every year we hit that number?
It is. We bake in an assumption of how many hours per month we're likely to need them. And we add a little bit more just to maybe, for example, they're currently helping with the in-city solar proposal. They helped with the unexpected audit and the findings and the resolution with OUC of the overbilling, which netted us back a significant amount of money. So that meant the more hours in discovery with OUC on that. But that's generally the number. Again, the hours are tied to how much we use them, and their hourly rate is competitive with other consultants in that market. I believe the number of $1 million that we spent with them is somewhat exaggerated. actually doing the math here. But we don't think it's anywhere near the million, but we'll check on that. But on an hourly basis, they're competitive. They also have at this point an awful lot of knowledge. So to unplug them and plug somebody else back in would be not impossible, but difficult. We do own the model. If we had more staff, if we were able to retain more staff with that capability, we certainly do more of it ourselves. But it's very helpful to have their expertise in the background. They're also very heavily involved with us in the natural gas side, understanding pipelines and pipeline capacity. So they do help with that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Do I have, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, and no opposed? Thank you. Passes unanimously. Moving on to number D. Purchase orders for Federal Contracts Corporation for the purchase and delivery of a 12,000 pound capacity forklift. One question, Mr. Liberty, do you need this?
Yes, we do.
Are there any public comment cards from either the clerk or on the dais?
Nope, not yet.
From the dais, we have none.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Ms. Plaga.
There's about a $2,000 difference in between what we budgeted for this and what we're actually spending. Or is there going to be a budget amendment to come along with this? I guess that's more for finance.
Yes, what we'll do is we'll transfer dollars to another account to make up to $2,000. So we underestimated it by $2,000 when we got the pricing. So we'll transfer money.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item.
Did these get used to raise that transformer that we had trouble with?
No, it's too small even for that. That transformer was 25 tons.
Oh, I don't think this.
Yes. No.
Ouch. Okay, so moving on to the next item, which is an agreement with High Rock Builders LLC for the construction of the Electrical System Operations Center at the water treatment plant. Now, is this Mr. Liberty or Mr. Shields?
That was
Liberty.
exactly my question.
Yes.
Too.
It is Liberty. Madam Mayor, I can provide an explanation. So our current electric system operations center, we refer to it as the ESOC or ESOC. That's not the city's emergency operations center. It's the electric system control room, if you will. It's a 1960s vintage building, very dated, lots of problems with animal invaders, whether it's raccoons or mice or rats or squirrels, possums. And of course, it's not a storm rated building. And that's the heart of our operating system. That's where the operators sit 7 by 24 in that building. There's mold, there's everything, that you can imagine in there that shouldn't be there. A number of years ago, actually 3 years ago, we looked at building a new building, and that number started to approach $2.5+ million to build a building that would be Category 5 compliant. Assistant Director Jason Bailey actually made the suggestion that perhaps we take over what was referred to as the training room at the water plant, which is on the third floor or second floor, top floor of the water plant. We thought about that and said, gee, that's actually a genius idea. The water department will agree. They did agree to give up that room.
I noticed that we're talking about when Brian's not here.
Yes, they did agree to do that. There are some benefits for staff as well. Number one, they're not necessarily number one, but it's a more secure building in terms of a storm. It's a more secure location for physical and system security. We also have in that building other plant operators that are there 7 by 24 by 365, which is the water plant operators. So right down the hall would be electric operators. They happen to be in the same union anyway. So it gives us a benefit of having multiple people in the building at the same time. The bathrooms are there. They're ADA compliant. There's an elevator. There's a galley. It's well suited for that. And we can add the badge access controls, which we need to do for NERC, critical infrastructure protection for the plant. So it's a great way to go. It's much cheaper than building a building. There's really not much incremental cost because we need to buy new desktop computers and the monitor wall, if you will. And we need to do that anyway. One of the features that this room will have that the current room does not have, if any of you have tried to visit during a storm and found yourself locked out, is that this will have a small viewing area, which will be separate from the control room itself. There'll be a small conference room with a viewing window. So if we're in a storm situation, the press wants an interview or something like that, we can do that without disturbing the operators in the room.
The water management district has a very similar setup to that.
Yep. So it has that benefit too.
Okay.
And it saves us a heck of a lot of money.
And just out of, can the water folks still accommodate some degree of training in that room, or is that, how to do that?
No, we're unfortunately going to have to lock them out for NERC SIP requirements. If they don't have the certifications and the background checks to be in that room, they would not be able to. That has included me at times. I found myself locked out. And but escorted access, yes, but not unescorted and not unimpeded.
Great, thank you very much.
Motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any public comments from the clerk or on the dais?
Not from the dais, I never know which one it is.
None from the clerk.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number F, task order number 11 with EC Fennel PA to provide engineering services.
So bear with me for a second, because lacking a demand response program, it's cold in here. And I had to put I had to pull a sweater on over my head here.
I'm going to step out for a second. I'll be right back. You just go ahead.
I'm good. Okay. EC Fennel. So EC Fennel is a local engineering company. And at the moment, we find ourselves short-staffed with a tremendous workload in our distribution engineering function. Our distribution engineering manager resigned due to personal family reasons. Had to take care of a parent out of the country. So we're running short. Recruiting is very, very difficult right now in this market. So we were able to get a proposal and a price from EC Fennel, again, a local firm that has distribution engineers, does work for us in other areas, and they're willing to post somebody into our offices nominally 1 day a week. We have an estimate of how much we would spend over the course of a year. We do expect that person would be in our office, possibly 1 or more days per week, based on our requests. So it's not automatic. It's based on the workload. A lot of the work that they're doing in this distribution engineering department is related to the hardening of the laterals as we convert the system. But also there's an awful lot of work that's coming out of our community and sustainability function out of William Waters' shop. There's a lot of infill development of 1 and 2s and 3s on residential development, small commercial, that all require engineering assessment of the electrical interconnection and the technology that we're going to deploy in terms of transformers, wire size, code approvals, things like that. So we need to keep up.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Were there any public comments, Madam Clerk? Okay,
I
thank
have
you.
none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Now we are on G. All right. Purchase order to Altech Industries for electric utility line trucks and equipment.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yep.
If I may, I'll offer some background on this. This is purchasing additional vehicles to replace older vehicles that are aging. These are what we call aerial lifts or bucket trucks. We call a trouble truck, which is a smaller bucket truck than the 55-footer. That's also being purchased, and what we call a backyard machine, which is a small tractor-like device that can fit down a narrow alleyway and actually carry up to a 55-foot pole with it, drill the hole, stand it vertically, and drop it into the hole. Followed by which the operators would then usually climb the pole and frame the pole and put everything on it. There was some confusion, I think, or some questions on this with regards to the budgeted amount. The original budget request, I believe, was 1.375 million. We were not able to accommodate that within the approved budgets that were approved for the year. We approved $580,000 that would come from bond funds, an additional $300,000 that would come from what we refer to as PAYGO. And that's all in the fiscal 23 capital budget planning documents. So $880,000 would allow us to proceed with these purchases. I know that there was a question from one of the commissioners, is a very good question, with regards to some lights. The workforce has noticed that, and very much like some of the new trucks that we've gotten, have these remote control lights, and it's literally a small device, the handheld device that you can use to remotely move the searchlight or the spotlight to shine a better light on the work zone. These new trucks will come equipped with that device. The question is, can we convert the old trucks that we've had for years and retrofit them with that device? So we are looking into whether or not that's possible and at what cost. But that's an operating cost and not an O&M budget item, but rather than a capital item. So this is just a capital item to order these new trucks, which, by the way, will have this nice new feature of these lights, which are, depending on the truck, are somewhere between $900, I think a little over $1,000 to have that feature, which I think is worthwhile to have.
Are those like what you find on boats, the remote?
Something like that, basic concept. But what it does is it allows the operator, while they may be the ground man, for example, or somebody on the ground, to actually, without having to climb back in the truck, just operate it remotely to shine it, to follow the pole as it's going up or the wires that's being pulled, where the person in the bucket's going, to track them better. So it's a better way to do it.
Having watched one of these endeavors between 12 and 2 in the morning during one of the storms in the last couple of weeks, the ground crew they had some pretty nice flashlights, but
right,
that light system would be a lot more helpful.
It's pretty powerful, especially the new LED lights. It's pretty effective. It does improve, the security of the people on the ground, knowing that the person in the air can see what they're doing, because they're moving between, tree limbs and live conductors, trying to get the boom into the right position to do the work safely. So it's good to have that.
Are these
Thank you very much.
for the backyard thing and for the 2 bucket trucks?
We have one backyard machine. This would give us 2. And the one that we have, we keep them as long as we possibly can. One of the things that we find, and certainly in, utility where I came from, where we did an awful lot of capital work, we're working our equipment really hard. We're doing a lot of new construction now. So the equipment is working literally, the trouble trucks are 7x24. They're always rolling.
Right.
But our digger derricks, our backyard machines, our larger buckets, they're on the road, 6 days a week in many cases now. So they're getting a lot more construction time, a lot more wear and tear than they did in the past. And what we run into is we have very limited service capability for those types of vehicles here. We don't have qualified aerial lift mechanics in our shops. That's an entirely different expertise than one needs to operate other things. So with these trucks have to go out, and the backlog once they go out for service is so long that we lose equipment. So it's better for us to buy a new equipment as these older units wear out. But unless they're absolutely shot and can't be repaired, we keep them as spares.
Great, thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor,
Oh, okay, question?
no, I just want to say thank you to Director Liberty for answering my questions. And I'm thankful that he addressed them. And with that, I'll give a motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Are there any public comments from anybody? Nope, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to H, agreement with Distran Package Substations for goods and services for prefabricated steel packaging. Mr. Liberty.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This item is related to the new Canal 26 kV substation, what we refer to as an 8 kV or 8 bay substation. So that substation is going to be rebuilt entirely. And in order to save construction costs, what we're doing is we're having the steel prefabricated to the specific design and, if you will, cut and framed the way we need it and then shipped to the site. So this will make construction easier than taking raw steel and then trying to cut it and weld it, and really speeds the construction process once that steel is here.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any public comments?
Competitive bids, it is quite a bit. $1,400,000.
I was just gonna ask for commission comments. Mr. McCoy?
I was
It is-
just curious whether this.
It is a competitive bid. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yep.
Are Our attorney answered yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, no public comments. Do I have we have a motion and a second? All in
Yes,
favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, which is emergency procurement of primary underground cable for I-95 crossing project.
Motion to approve on that one.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
We don't like live cables across 95.
I couldn't quite hear that. That's okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Thank you. Passes unanimously. Moving to the last agenda item, which is proposed changes to the residential electric utility rate tiers. Mr. Liberty.
Yes, so good evening. Recall that a number of meetings ago, we had a request from the City Commission to investigate the possibility of increasing the number of tiers that we use in our rates. And that's tiers, T-I-E-R-S, not T-E-A-R-S.
Although there's a lot of those involved.
Yes, including at staff. It's not something that
I understand.
it's easy to do or palatable. So the quick answer for which we provided the last meeting, yes, multiple tiers are possible. And as the commissioner who requested this properly indicated, or vice mayor properly indicated, it had been done in the past. And we discovered, yes, it had been done in the past. It was discontinued. We think about 9 years ago, 8, 9, or 10 years ago, but it's certainly possible to do 3 tiers. We did check with the Public Service Commission staff to get their thoughts. They seemed okay with it. They had no objection to it. Subsequent at the last meeting, the commission requested that we consider 5 tiers. So we put some additional time and effort into developing 5 tiers. And we do have on the phone tonight or on Zoom, rates consultant Craig Shepard from Leidos, who has done the analysis. You should have all received an email from me today, and I did hand out hard copies here of some additional information which we put together with regards to our cost of service. And I thought this would be helpful for the commission to just be aware of how our rates for residential customers compare to what we call the cost of service. So the cost of service, if you happen to have that, we look at it in 2 ways. One is what we call the total cost of service, which is the total cost that we incur to provide a residential customer with electric service. And when we do that for various sizes, from down as low as 200 kilowatt hours a month up to, let's say, 2,000 or more. We then also take a look at it and separate out the variable costs, such as fuel costs, what we call the PCA. If we strip out the PCA, we look at the cost just for fixed costs. So that's just the cost of having the poles, the trucks, the people to maintain all of that, the debt service, inventory, and our basic nuclear costs are in there as well, and our fixed costs, because they don't move very much. What we find when we do that is that today we have approximately 42% of our residential customers, which is a sizable number, 42% of our residential customers are receiving service at or below the fixed costs that we've incurred to provide them with that service. Taking a step further, if you add in the cost of fuel or the PCA, upwards of 59%, and these are round numbers, not exact, but upwards of 59% of our residential customers are receiving service below the total cost of service. I think that's something to keep in mind as you consider whether you want to do 3 tiers or 5 tiers. It's just something to have in the back of your minds that we already have very competitive rates for customers that are certainly below 1,000 kilowatt hours and probably well below certainly below 1,000 kilowatt hours who are receiving service at or below the cost of service. As we look at trying to create additional tiers of rates, it gets more and more difficult because there's not enough large customers whose rates can increase to provide a subsequent decrease to customers at the lower end, right? So that the curve is slanted. The vast majority of our customers are well below the larger sizes. In the backup material is the distribution of customers that we provided in prior meetings that shows you that, for example, 8% of our customers are receiving a minimum bill. I mean, you're using less than 214 kilowatt hours in a month. There's approximately 16% of our customers that are between 214 kilowatt hours a month and 500 kilowatt hours a month. This is all in the backup. And again, there's 18% that are between 500 to 750, 17% that are between 750 to 1,000. So we just go through that and you get a feel for how many customers are in these categories. So the challenge in trying to create more tiers, and we're not opposed to it, we're waiting, we'll take direction from policymakers and how you want to do it, is to have it be somewhat reasonable in terms of the distribution. We did provide some information in the email which spoke to what the price difference is now between the smaller customers and the larger customers in terms of how many cents per kilowatt hour increase exists as you go further up. So there is an incentive for the larger customer to decrease their energy use because they're paying more per kilowatt hour than a smaller customer. Although, for example, Vice Mayor and I have talked about this, is that increase in price substantial enough to substantially incent them to install new equipment or to decrease the temperature during the wintertime or increase the temperature during the summertime to move the thermostat to achieve energy conservation. That's to be debated and I think decided by you folks as policymakers. Some of the other things that we checked into were, for example, will our billing system accommodate 5 tiers? So the billing system in the past accommodated 3 tiers. So in theory, we could revive that and have it do it again. Just enter new numbers. That may sound simple. It may not be so simple, but I understand that it can do that. It would need to be modified to accommodate 5 tiers, but I've been told that that's not impossible. That could be done.
You can do 3.
Right. But it did 3 in the past, so it would be somewhat easy, I assume, to just plug new numbers into the 3. The 5 has to be created, but I was told that it can be done. The other piece of it is, will the bill printing work? Because we use a bill printing company. So we do the billing calculations internally. We send them a file every day to print the next batch of bills. So it's our understanding that the bill printing can accommodate this. Now, it would take some amount of time. I would say, if you decide you want to do this, and then no, we're not asking you to vote on this tonight, you need to discuss it. You certainly can if you want to, but we would need a few months just to make sure that we get all the pieces put together and get the rates in place to have it work the way you want it to. And those are my opening comments on that. So it's not impossible. If you want us to do it, we can do it.
Right. This is a discussion topic only, I believe. For
Correct. We were not suggesting a motion. I think at the prior meeting, I had written a motion, a potential motion. As we discovered that night, the commission was not ready to act on a motion, and I assumed you would not be ready to act on a motion tonight, so I did not include one. But
okay, so it is. We have some time then for discussion. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments from you?
I have one, Madam Mayor, and Commissioner Maliga has her hand raised.
Okay, Commissioner Maliga.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is I had inquired in regards to separating the bill and billing our residents in 2 separate bills, one for water, sewer, and garbage, and the other one for electric. Has that been looked into as well, Director?
yes, in response to that, we've started to put the numbers together. Our preliminary estimates are upwards of about a $200,000 a year cost, if not more, between postage and printing supplies and getting that out. There's also some question as to how that would work within the billing system. When that bill comes in, is the billing system set up to accommodate an entirely different bill coming in and making sure that the funds get to the right place? There was some discussion with finance with regards to that at a meeting that we had that involved our potential new billing system vendor as to how that would be accommodated. And there were still a lot of unknowns as to how exactly that would work. At the very least, we know that we'd be looking at about a $200,000 annual expense between postage and printing to separate the bill.
A lot.
If I could follow up on that one.
Go ahead.
I wholeheartedly support Commissioner Maliga's suggestion of some degree of separation of the electric bill from the water, sewer, and garbage, because our reputation as a city of being expensive, a certain percentage of that is people look down at the total and they say, oh my gosh, and they're not remembering to go back and look at just the electric. A question maybe to go back as you look further at it, suppose that the two bills were simply printed on separate papers, which to some extent they are now, color code them somewhat. And I'm kind of blue for water and green for electric, but I'm agnostic of what you want to do. But keep them that somebody can real clearly see these are different things, but you could mail them in the same envelope.
Right, I agree with that. I think that's a good idea.
I do as well. And in addition to that, Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, because I'm zooming and I'm not there, but I think if your support, maybe we could use the same bill and just put two different due dates. Because we're trying to reprieve to our residents.
Can you mail them at the same time, but two different due dates?
Wait, so you
Can-
have to write two checks, and when you go to 7-Eleven, you have to pay the convenience fee twice. Or when you pay online, you have to pay that convenience fee twice. Is that correct or no?
That's effectively what would wind up happening is you'd wind up paying a convenience fee twice. And the current bill,
But no, wait, excuse me. I don't see I don't see that if we're printing it on, if we're just making it clear on the bills. This is the electric page, this is the water page, your total bill is the combination of those two. That would be one bill, that would be one payment. I think what we're trying to do is not make it complicated, but just make it clear for people to sort of help out with this misunderstanding that so many people have about our bills. So I don't see why we couldn't just have it, the total of these two pages is $300. One was 150, one was 150, and here's the total. So I have to question that double payment service charge.
So I had my light on, but
Okay,
so-
I'll call on you then.
Yeah, my quick question on that was, so then what we're talking about now for splitting the bill is just physically splitting the pages, but it's still one bill, because I think if I remember, we had discussed it the last time, potentially like staggering the due dates to kind of lessen the blow of the payments. So are we,
That's exactly what we were talking about.
are we talking about just like splitting the pages and it's still one bill, or are we talking about two separate bills?
That's what I was talking about. I mean, if people, we all know that there's a monthly bill coming up and, I know that budgeting is hard, but if you know it's coming up, I think Mr. Liberty, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like two separate billing dates or two separate payment dates might make this whole thing more of a kerfuffle than it would be, than it really should be.
if I can offer some clarification, then so yes, if we had different payment dates, that is going to be problematic because the current bill today has a tear off stub, for example, that you mail or cut off stub, whatever you want to call it, that you mail back with the bill, or you take it to the Pay Near Me location and you pay. So if we're going to have two separate dates, you'd need probably two of those in the bill.
And two fees.
And they'd probably incur two convenience fees because it'd be like two different bill payments, two separate transactions. The bill as this currently designed today, which I believe uses a lot more blues. I think we tried to avoid colors that were predominantly difficult for colorblindness, which I happen to be red-green colorblind. So that might create problems. We could increase the amount of pages in there by having a blank insert, if you will, to then separate the pages. But we specifically designed the bill so that each utility would have its own page already. So I don't know how to, there's a cover page, then there's an electric page, a water page, refuse page, and there's, I believe, a community messaging section that we use as well. So we've actually had, and we didn't expect this, but we had people that complained that the new bill was too complicated. We thought the new bill was much simpler. We got the opposite. So I think that if we tried to split the bill with different due dates, I can't imagine the concerns that we get about a problem not understanding the bill.
I see Ms. Malega's hand is up. Ms. Malega? You're breaking up. We can't hear you.
But we are quite a bit off topic here. This is not an item on the agenda.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear you at all. And
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what I was saying is the whole point was to give our residents reprieve. And the city of Delray, the city of Lantana, everybody else, all residents pay two bills. They pay FPL and then
What?
Oops, she went away.
Let me address that because that's an interesting subject. While they do get two bills, and remind people that if you're an FPL customer, I believe you get cut off at 31 days. And in Lake Worth Beach, you get as many as 42 days or perhaps even more. So we're much more lenient with our billing than our competitors are. That doesn't make it better or worse. I think it's better for our residents that we do that. But they are here in one bill. They're in two bills. I should also point out that if you don't pay your bill and you do get disconnected, and that's usually 42 days or more after it was late or after it was due, that you finally do get disconnected. The water is not disconnected for at least another 5 days after that. So I don't know what the policy in the other cities are, but I believe that we're fairly lenient in that regard.
Okay, thank you. So we have gone a little off. Let's go back to the tier system that we were going to talk about. Who wants to pick up that conversation?
So we did provide examples of the 3-tier and the 5-tier and how that would apply. These are examples that, some people refer to as a straw man or whatever you want to call it. It's a proxy for what you can do. I think, the distribution is ultimately up to you, how you would like it to be. It's all designed to be revenue neutral. We did have a request that we try to make the impact to that 1,000 kilowatt hour customer negligible or near zero, if not zero completely. So we tried to make sure that, if you will, the seesaw tips right around that point. So there's no impact to that 1,000 kilowatt hour customer. The impacts would be above that and below that.
Okay, so colleagues, what say you about this the tiers? Mr. McVoy?
Yes, couple thoughts. Thank you to Director Liberty and staff for looking into it and checking into the various potential obstacles to make sure that we can, in fact, that this is a viable path, and maybe bumpy, but it's doable. I guess my feeling is, as a policy matter, if we can find a way to charge our customers in the most equitable way possible, that's something that I think we probably all want to do. And I think that more tiers makes that more possible. It's a more equitable approach to give people a range of places that they can choose to be on their usage, and that they get some benefit from it. So I'm thinking of this, and I think that was our motivation when we brought it up in July, is that this is one more of the all of the above approach, that it gives people an additional tool to manage their bills. It won't be for everybody. It won't be accessible for everybody necessarily. And we probably want to think about, as Director Liberty just mentioned, having the pivot point be around the 1,000 kilowatt hours. That's sort of the standard, the planning standard that most households use. Makes a lot of sense to put it there. Something that I did to try to help think about this a little bit more is I asked for how do we do it with water? Some lights just went out. Hopefully that's not related to anything. How do we do it with water? And I knew that we had 5 tiers. I knew that it was state mandated, that it's been in place for a long time, that it's specifically intended to encourage water conservation. But I didn't know some things. When I got the rates and then calculated them out, and I don't know what maybe our mathematician can help me, but I call it the skew. How far is the rates tipped? That the lower end, they're less than the mean rate, and at the higher end, they're higher. How much is that skew? What I'm estimating from looking at the proposal with either the 5 or the 3 is it looks like it's about a 5% skew at the top end, and I didn't check it at the low. But if you look at the water, I mean, I opened my eyes quite a bit. The skew is at the cheapest end, you're 40% of the mean rate. At the high end, you're 180%. It's very skewed that as you go up in your usage, you're paying a lot more for the additional amount of water. I talked to Mr. Shields about that and I said, okay, that's helpful to know. Where do most of our customers fit on those 5 tiers? And he said most are at the bottom tier, some go up to the second tier. So in his opinion, the tiers really work. It's pushed us to be down at the lower end. And in fact, the data to other communities, we are lower than average in our household usage per month of water. So 5 tiers works. It apparently works with the billing because we're sending those bills in the same package. So it's doable there. And apparently a pretty hefty skew on it also works and has produced some helpful results. So it gave people a strong incentive to look at their usage and decide how much they wanted to do. So I would be in favor of the 5. And I guess I have one other thought, but let's hear from others first.
Thank you. I just have a question for Mr. Liberty. Would 5 really make more than a negligible difference to the people, to the customers? Would that actually show some help to them?
Well, I think it could. It's not substantive because the smaller customers might save anywhere between I'd say $1.67 or $2 a month. But the larger customers are going up substantially. I think the bigger issue here is I want to be very careful not to project the wrong image with respect to inequity or equity. We have 59% of our customers that are receiving service below the cost of service. And that's all in with the PCA. And that's a rough number. 42% are receiving service below our fixed cost of service. So 42% of our customers are receiving service below what we've spent to provide them the service.
So the other customers are paying for it, are picking up the slack for that.
Certainly, if you then take the inverse of that, you'd say, gee, almost 40% of the customers are paying a substantially higher. The rate difference between a smaller customer and a larger customer, I think today, and I'd look to use my lifeline with Craig Shepard at Leidos, is it 3.8 cents a kilowatt hour today, Craig?
Hello, this is Craig Shepard. Today, the differential between the first and last block is 3.0 cents. The way we've proposed the 3-tier rate is 3.8 cents, and the 5-tier is 4.8. And even your existing rates are on the high end. I don't think anybody else is higher than 3 in the state right now. The other thing is the standard is the 2-block rate. There is one other utility in Florida I know has a 3-block. I'm all for innovative rates, and we did talk to the PSC about a 3-tier. I don't see too much difference other than the 4,000, 5,000 kilowatt hours where it impacts them on the 5-tier rate. So my other comment was that generally when you make a change in rate structure, you want to make it gradually so you see what the effect is. You could start out with a 3-tier and see how that affects usage, because then you'll know how that affects revenues. You don't want to have a revenue shortfall if all of a sudden everybody changes their usage. So, I would recommend a gradual change if you do a change. And I also want to point out that you already have a pretty substantial conservation rate.
So can I, because I'm on the low end of, I'm still at the electricity for idiots stage. So if we do more levels and it helps the lower user, it actually though harms the higher user, it becomes higher for the higher user. Am I correct in that, or am I just not understanding it?
That's correct. And to make the average customer around 1,000, there's not much difference below 1,000 between the 3-tier and the 5-tier. The big difference comes in the high users, the 3, 4, or 5,000, and you just don't have that many of those. one other comment I had was, I know generally you like to protect the low income user. However, some high users are not necessarily low income. They may be, have a lot of people in the household, and they may have inefficient homes.
Yeah.
So you may be not trying to achieve your goal.
Right, hurting people that really shouldn't, not hurting, raising it. I mean, and so it's a minimal advantage to the lower user,
Right.
but a higher disadvantage to the higher user.
That's correct.
And if we leave it the way it is, we have 3 tiers now?
You have
No.
2 tiers.
2 tiers, okay, 2 tiers. And the difference between what we do now and 3 or 5 tiers would be negligible at the bottom, but exaggerated at the top.
Right. At the bottom, they would save, $1 to $2 a month. At the top, it could go up to, $10, $20 more.
More a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Remember, at the top, that's $20 on a $800 bill. So in terms of percentage change, it's pretty small.
That's correct.
So if we look in the backup material,
right, it's $1.50 change. I don't know what. Yeah,
the backup material, there's a comparison of existing and alternate 3 block, and there's a same thing comparison of existing and alternate 5 block. So we just for a moment, we look at 3 block, even we looked at that last month, but let's just pick as an example, a 2,000 kilowatt hour customer in the
Okay.
3 block. That customer today, if I understand the bill correctly, is paying $300.39. That was actually in December, right? December 22, $300.39. That customer's rate would go up to $304. So they'd go up by $3.76. If I go down below, I'd say, okay, let's say a 750 kilowatt hour customer is getting $107.99 bill. It's going to go down by $1.09. So the customer who's above is going up by $3.76. The one who's below is going down by $1.09. If you take it to the extreme, it's okay. So do we have a 4,000 kilowatt hour customer? And actually we do. And that customer was rather vocal on Facebook, and they put themselves out there with their location, right? They were well over 4,000. It's inconceivable how somebody in a 2,000 square foot home was using that much power, but that's what they said. And they put their own bills out there. That bill would be $620 right now. It would go up by $11.52.
so really none of this is that much difference. I mean, we're spending a lot of time and not really, I mean, we're talking about $1. We're talking about, I mean, the biggest difference is, although it's not a huge difference, the biggest difference is at the high end. So, I mean, how?
It does, but
My
I'm sorry,
next-
Mayor.
Yeah,
It
go
does.
ahead.
Let me continue with that analysis though. If you then jump to the 5 tier, that
Right.
4,000 kilowatt hour customer, their bill would, instead of going up $11.52, goes up $31.52. When you go to the 5 tier. Now you can certainly keep, even though you've got 5 tiers, you can try to move the dollars around, but the difficulty is you're trying to minimize the impact to that 1,000 kilowatt hour customer and give something to the ones at the lower end. But at some point, you run out of money that you can raise from the large customers to give something meaningful to the small customers. I think, speaking for the vice mayor, the challenge here is to give customers an incentive to use less, right?
Yeah, but
So I think there's certainly that's one part of it. That was certainly what I had in mind is, not so much to give them an incentive to use less, but give them an option to save money by getting a better rate. If they do be more conscious of their usage, they'll both lower the total and lower the rate that they're paying it. And I guess the thing that I would come back to is, when we're looking at the 3 versus 5 comparison, recall that you can move the numbers around a lot of different ways as far as how steep you make that slope, where you put the pivot point. I don't think we want to move it much from the 1,000, maybe move it up to the 1,200 or something, but that isn't going to change it a lot. But keep in mind that we have done the experiment with the water with the difference between the low end is 40% of the mean rate and the high end is 180% of the mean rate. It's a much bigger skew or slope or whatever the right technical word for it is between the lowest tier and the highest tier. And then it runs fairly smoothly in between. And it worked. Most everybody is sitting down at the bottom two tiers. So
we changed the way that people live their lives.
apparently, because our mean usage is significantly lower than, we're the lowest in Palm Beach County.
I stopped using irrigation when I got my water bill like that. But
Yeah, I see Ms. Malega's hand is up for quite a while. Ms. Malega?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My concern is that, and I understand we're trying to be equitable, right? But you can't technically punish somebody because they have a 2,500 square foot home and 4 kids who never turn off the lights.
Right.
And I feel that the 5-tier system effectively does that. And it's a little bit different with water, right? Water, you shower, you wash your dishes, you brush your teeth, it's minimal. You use irrigation system or you don't. I feel that the 5-tier system is just too aggressive towards big families. And I'm not in favor of it. I just think that the numbers are they're too varied.
Okay, so we don't have a motion. This is a discussion. So
we have lights on
Miss-
over here.
hi, sorry, you got to wave or something so I can see you.
Well, I was gonna request that we could get, I know Brian's not here, but I'd like to see the distribution. I'd like to see the numbers of the distribution, the way that the water rates are used, just for my own understanding. And I'm also curious about who these high users are. I don't know if there's a way of, I know you've done a lot of investigation, Mr. Liberty, with the people that are high consumers that have very high bills due to high consumption. So do we have an idea of, instead of just guessing at who this would be affecting, do we actually know, like there's Palm Beach State College or, like who do we, and you don't have to tell me that now, but I would like to have a general idea. And I know it's not going to be like all one category of people. So I just like to understand more businesses.
So let me answer that carefully because I want to put the public at ease that we're not investigating them. So we do have the ability to, I would imagine, do a force sort of data, and from the lowest consuming address to the highest consuming address. This discussion, by the way, is just residential.
Okay.
We're only looking at residential customers here. What we do investigate is bills that are suddenly unusually high. We don't release any type of data that would allow somebody to deduce hours of occupancy or time of occupancy in a home. So we can look at total bill, but not hourly. We can certainly provide that, but it happens to be one of the features of living in a community with a municipal utility. It's public information, what everybody pays in electric. We can certainly provide that data. It's going to have we just look at residential, probably 23,500, 24,000 lines in it. So it's a rather large spreadsheet. And it has actually the account owner, who's what the address is and who the account owner is. So if you wanted to see that and you want us to, for example, remove the names or something like that, we could certainly give you that or give it to you in entirety because it is public information.
And looking at the residential distribution, if you went to a month like January and pulled those names, those are the 527 customers that are still above 2,000 kilowatts in January, rather than going to September and trying to tackle 3,600 customers.
Right, but what we don't know and what we don't have data on, and it's not in one data set, we'd have to find a way to do this, would be to correlate the square footage of the premise together with the energy they're using. So for example, just to draw an extreme, if you were using 4,000 kilowatt hours in a 2,000 square foot home, that to me is extreme. And that would raise a flag. If you were using 4,000 kilowatt hours in a 6,000 square foot home, you'd say, maybe that's, an entirely different type of home and they've got a lot of stuff going there.
Mm-hmm.
But usually what you want to do is start looking at energy use per square foot. And we just don't have the ability to do that right now, but we can certainly if you wanted to see every customer that's above 2,000 or above 2,500, we can certainly get you a list that would disclose that.
Probably similarly, we can't do usage per capita, right? Because I think comparing our water rates to electric rates, I think it gets us only so far, because something that needs to be, I think, understood is, there's 11 people in this room right now. The electric usage is going to be fairly consistent,
Right.
but if we all, use the restroom in the next 10 minutes, the 11 people in this room now compared to 100 people, whether there's 11 or 100 people in this room, the electric is going to be pretty consistent. The water usage in the building is not.
Well, it'll go up very high at halftime at Super Bowl. So if you have that Super Bowl party,
Exactly. Yeah.
it'll go up. But but there are big data companies. We actually did spend a bunch of time with one of the consultants who was considered for the demand response program, for example. And they have put a lot of time and effort into taking publicly available data from census information and countywide information, state information, and then municipal energy information. And for example, they can pull square footages from the Palm Beach County Property Appraiser data site, right? And you have all those square footages. You can then correlate that to a home or in the energy bill for that home. Probably wouldn't get the gas bill because that's not a public company like we are, or a municipal on the electric side, but you can certainly do that on the electric side. But there's a lot of analysis that you could do, but that takes a lot of time and effort. So what we just have is raw data. How much electricity went into that specific home that month or that year?
I just want to add one more thing. I'm sorry, I just want to add one more thing as I'm sitting here thinking, when we talk about the high usage people and, they could reduce or a lot of those, they may be tenants and there just might be no insulation in that house. There might be jealousy windows in that house and they're tenants and they have no ability to fix that situation. So I just think we need to bear that in mind with that, the rates going up.
And I will put something out there to help deter, what I would call, unwanted activities. When we do see something that's very, very high and unusually high, that's an indication of perhaps some other type of activity happening in the house, in that location that we may not want to have happen. But
yeah, okay.
But we
Any
don't
other
have
comments?
any control over that. It just raises an eyebrow and say, what the heck is going on there?
Yeah.
But it seems like, for instance, from the property appraiser, one could get linked to the address, the square footage, the date of construction of the building. And I would assume there are clever programmers out there that can use the property appraiser's API and pull that stuff. And then we could cross-link it with Excel to our data set. So we could do somebody could do. I don't know, at one point I was thinking of doing it and then I got busy with everybody's research, but it's certainly a doable task. And I've always felt that it's important for us to look at it, not only for the rate tiers, but this reputation that we have for being the most expensive, that everyone in this room, I think, agrees that we're not. The data does not support the public opinion that says, oh, we're crazy expensive. We're not. I think you can remind us we're pretty low in the municipal, we're pretty low in the state. We're not the cheapest, but we're down at the low end.
Right. On a rolling 12-month basis through the end of September, we were 6th lowest in the state.
That's pretty impressive.
We came from 24th 5 years ago. Now, every month, but some of it is timing.
Hi, Miss Clerk?
We've reached the half-hour mark.
Okay, so I think we are at the half-hour mark that either we're going to go to a workshop or
I do
we're
have a
gonna-
public comment as well.
Oh, okay. All right, give me 1 second. I just want to finish my thought. That we either go to the workshop or each of us individually meet with Mr. Liberty, give them our thoughts and our questions, and then have it come back. I don't think that we're at a point in this conversation to give any direction. We have a lot of ideas going around. So
I would like to add one thing. The first part of this discussion was not related to this discussion. I don't know if that was counted to the 30 minutes or not.
Yeah.
But my main point that I want to make is I've heard a ton of different options that are out there. So, and we keep looking at them all in isolation. So this to me has been very helpful. So this is an option and this is something that's a possibility. And now we have data in front of us that we can look and digest. But then we also, when we talk about net metering, I don't know if we're planning on any changes to that rate structure at all in the future. We heard from Vice Mayor McVoy that the possibility of time of use rates. And I don't know what a community solar tariff is, but it seems related to the rates. So there's all of these different floating things out there. And for me, it would be really useful to kind of bundle them together as not one program, but just kind of what are all of these? So now we all know 3 and 5 tiers because we've talked about this twice. So what are all the other options? I think that would be helpful for me.
So do you think a workshop would be a good idea, Ms. Stokes?
Yeah, I think a workshop or, start distributing some of the information if it's available or. Yeah, I know we're having a workshop on the integrated resource plan.
But it
which
sounds
I
like-
had asked for, but I also, part of that might, if we're talking about demand response and other things like that, lead into different rate structures. So.
Right. So what I'm thinking is if we all get some information from staff regarding all these different issues that you're talking about. And so we have, we walk into a workshop with some knowledge, not just walking cold into it, that might be helpful.
Yes.
Okay. So can I ask, can I get consent? And we have a public comment, but I'd like to get some consensus to direct staff to, put us together a little handbook on all the different things that we've talked about tonight, and come back and have a workshop at some point, not before Christmas. Let's find a date for that. Oh, that's a challenge, but this is important stuff. This is electric rates, this is very important. And Commissioner Vice Mayor McVoy is right. I mean, there is a perception out there that we're the highest. I'm on Facebook a lot, and some people, can confront with them with the facts, and it does not matter. Perceptions are people are going to believe what they want to believe. But I think the public information and opening it up and being more transparent, it will certainly help us. I agree with you on that, Mr. McVoy. So why don't we direct staff to gather some information to give us little, outlines of different options, and then get it set for a workshop. We have consensus to do that?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, Mr. Diaz, you've been so
I'm
quiet
in.
tonight. Okay. Ronaldo?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think, like Commissioner Stokes points out, our IRP workshop, I think we should go into that with a broad mind and considering all these things that we talked about today, demand response,
Great.
all these things, because it all does relate.
Yeah, and then
So I know that I need to learn more about it before I can go into a workshop. I'm definitely sure of that. So let's hear the public comment.
Okay.
The public comment I have is from Cindy Lookabout at 1102 North Palmway. I am concerned about number 1, transparency of Lake Worth Beach utility decisions, and number 2, management of Lake Worth Beach electric services. Why are we being charged or buying natural gas at a 400% markup when the rest of the country in Florida is paying 165% markup from last year's price? Instead of telling the residents to better manage their electric use, we want Lake Worth Beach Electric to better manage their electric production, or better yet, let's convert to better managed, less costly FPL.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we have direction to staff. Yeah.
Yes, we'll await your questions. We'll gather information and we'll try to
Great.
find a spot.
And I'll certainly set up a meeting with you, Mr. Liberty, to inform me of this stuff. I appreciate your time.
And
So, thank you very much, everybody. I think we're ready. Anything else?
Mr. Liberty still has.
I was going to provide some closing comments on some things that,
Please
have
do. Please
recent
do.
events, which I think would be of interest for the commissioners to be aware of.
ahead.
One is obviously we experienced a Hurricane Nicole. It had a big H on it, targeted right at us, right to the City Hall front steps, and it wobbled late in the process. And fortunate for us, but unfortunate for our neighbors to the north, went further north. We did incur significant expenses in having visiting contractors standing by to help us. We're putting together those numbers. What I can say is that we're spending less on storms than we had in the past, and we're seeing less damage than we had in the past. So the initial results of the hardening effort are positive. Well, I think what we've now had 2 successive storms this year where we asked contractors to come here, with that big H staring us in the face. And then even though we had 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, we had rather light damage that we handled entirely with our own people. They did a fantastic job. So it's a tough call to make, but I think going forward, we may try to decrease the amount of visiting contractors that we bring, try to reduce the expense. But frankly, there's always a risk of being second guessed. If it doesn't wobble at the last minute, then we don't have the crews here. But that's how we're doing it. And during Nicole, we had a little bit longer outages that we had during Ian, and that was due to the type of damage that we had in terms of where it was located. They were in rather inaccessible locations, what we call non-accessible, and meaning that they were climbers. That's code for meaning we had to climb the pole. I don't climb the poles, as you can tell, but our linemen do, and they do a great job. And they were tough ones. But I believe the vast majority of customers that experienced an outage were out within 4 hours. And we did restore quicker than our neighbors, and fortunately had less damage. Major work underway in our main yard. We talked about the east and the west bus. It's not actually a bus that transports people, but it looks like the breaker row in your cabinet at home. We segmented the bus into 6 different segments on those 2 buses, and that's been good. We are removing now week by week as we isolate each section, which we can now do, which we didn't have the ability to do before, removing equipment that dates back to the 1960s. That's been in use. And you can tell with the old
to the museum.
Some of it can go to
Vintage. It's vintage.
it's vintage. The insulators, if somebody wants them, there's a lot of old copper stuff there. And of course, that will be scrapped for copper value. But the old porcelain insulators that are brown, they actually date back to the 1960s. That's all coming out. So it's improving reliability. The downside is during the course of doing that work, we have to have the system out of normal configuration. And when we're out of normal configuration, one animal contact, one motor vehicle accident can really wreak havoc on the system. And we did experience that. We had 2 sizable outages while out of normal configuration. One of which would have been helped greatly if we'd had that I-95 crossing repaired. But but there's going to be some pain going through this when you operate at normal configuration. So to that point, 2 weeks ago, we did have a failure of the 12th Avenue South substation transformer. There's a 25-ton transformer that provides service to thousands of customers in that area. The transformer failed in what we call the load tap changer, which adjusts the voltage to the customers. And the parts for a transformer that has a 1969 nameplate are very hard to find. We concluded that we could not take the risk of not finding parts ahead of Thanksgiving. During this period of time, we had the system out of normal configuration, and probably upwards, I think about 800 to 1,000 customers were onto circuits which would normally desirably operate at 200 amps and 300 amps. We're operating close to 550 amps, close to 600 amps, near the design limits. So we made the decision to spend the money, take the spare that we had, and roll it into place. That's probably going to cost us upwards of $40,000 to $50,000 by the time all the bills come in. And we did get that in place, and we were able to make the load through Thanksgiving. We do believe, in looking at how the system behaved, that had we not made those changes, we would have had rolling blackouts in that section of the city during Thanksgiving, and certainly over the weekend. So we're on a razor's edge with a lot of our equipment, and but it's in the capital plan to rebuild that substation after we do 6th Avenue South. So it's a bit down the road, but it's in the plan.
Well, we appreciate everything that you and your staff are doing, and the hardening certainly is, having been here for a long time, I know that the hardening is working.
Well, we do the white collar stuff in the office, the planning, the thinking, the strategy that goes into it, or strategic thinking. It really credit goes to the IBEW workforce that's out there moving this equipment around, operating the system, and also our PEU workforce and PMSA. And we do have some highly dedicated contractors in the transformer repair business that really worked through weekend, sunrise to sunset, trying to make these repairs. Fortunately, we had made the right decision a number of years ago, probably 3 years ago, to have a rebuilt transformer fully ready to go. And it proved to be very, very good. We had literally just picked it up with the crane, trucked it a few miles. We had to take a rather long path to avoid any low-hanging wires and bridges and get it there. But plugged it in, warmed it up, and it's, knock on wood, been working. So that's good. On a financial side, we did have a very good conversation with Fitch, one of the 3 rating agencies. That took place on the 17th. That was we believe, a successful meeting. That was a rapid fire, about a 45-minute break. They had 10 questions they submitted in advance. They wanted them answered. We used our own finance department, Stantec, to do the modeling, Davenport, our financial advisors. And then I was literally on the witness stand providing information. It's a private rating. It's a private,
Fitch is one of the three, Moody, Fitch.
and Standard & Poor's.
Yeah.
They're one of the big three. They track our financial well-being, specifically the well-being of this electric utility. And they report that to the bondholders of, for example, the FMPA St. Lucie project, which we are the biggest municipal participant in. So all indications are that the meeting went well. There's been no follow-up questions and no concerns, and they seemed happy during the call. So we got through that.
That's very good news.
That's great news.
Yeah.
We do have the FMPA Solar 2 new pricing has been received. I have it in my possession under lock and key. We will need to get your approval, I believe. Looking to council, I believe we do need city commission approval to modify that contract for the new pricing.
Yep.
And so expect an invitation from me. I'll work with Sylvina for one-on-ones. This will be a public vote. However, the actual pricing cannot be shared. It's confidential. But in public, in one-on-one, you'll certainly see the pricing. The revised pricing is still very competitive, much below what we're looking at for other alternatives, including FMPA Solar 3. So it's a very good contract, and walking you through the details of that, including the pricing one-on-one in my office. But appreciate that I can't send it out and that we can't talk about the numbers in a public forum.
And that's, it's a private contract.
Correct. It's a private contract with an independent developer, negotiated under a very strict confidentiality. Having
Great.
said that, I can tell you that it's a very good contract. Now that I'm trying to target, if at all possible, we can't wait till the end of January. They would like to have firm decisions by the participants, which includes us, by January 15th. That leaves us either the December 20th meeting or the January 3rd meeting for you to vote on it. So we'd have to have the one-on-ones ahead of time. I don't think any of us want to spend New Year's Eve altogether, so nor Christmas Eve. But I would suggest that if it's, I'll work with city manager, an assistant city manager, see if there's a way to get it on the December 20th agenda, which means that literally in the next week or so, we would be getting together to talk about the pricing. If that's not possible, we would stretch that a little bit and do the January 3rd meeting.
I think let's try to help out and do the one-on-ones early if possible, so we could do that vote. Because it seems like the sooner you can get that information, the sooner we can get that solar part going.
So we'll see if we can make the December 20 meetings, which means I have to have it on agenda probably around the 5th or the 6th of December. So, and in that, between now and the 20th, we'd have to have the one-on-ones. If we can't complete the one-on-ones and you're not comfortable, we can move it to the 3rd, but the sooner the better. But we are in a leadership position here. We are the largest participant as a municipality in that group. And I'm also, as you know, very vocal at the committee level at FMPA and pushing for these projects because they're so attractively priced and they fit who we are in terms of carbon reduction. Rates. Last month, we elected to postpone any change in the PCA and said, let's watch the market. And the market continues to fall under us. You all have a little spreadsheet graph in front of you, which I provided. And that's just a quick one. Yep, that's it. It's information only, and it shows the line where we set the PCA for September 1, assuming a gas price of about $7.90 in that neighborhood. And then the blue line shows what the gas prices have actually come in at. So you can see that we're coming in below. Now we're trying to work down the $4.3 million expense that we built up because we were undercharging for the PCA for some period of time. And we underestimated.
Just to remember, for the PCA refers
the purchase power cost adjustment.
and it's basically the variable, the fuel related part of our costs.
Correct. I think that's important to point out to the public, many of which are, in tiers over the bills, but our gas prices went up by 3, 4, 5 times what our rates were designed to accommodate. And those were very sudden and very rapid. So as we were billing customers, we were using a rate that was much lower than the cost we were incurring because the cost took off on us. Fortunately, we didn't wait a year to do that because we would have run out of working capital as a city probably to do that. But we set a rate that was pretty aggressive. rather than raise it again on December 1, the commission, with discussion with myself and staff, opted to stay where we're at and let the prices come down. And it does appear that prices are in fact lower than the prices that we had set on September 1. But so we're working off that prior imbalance, which was about $4.3 million, and we're gaining on it. So I'll continue to monitor that and keep you apprised. And that's what I committed to do. And that's what this curve will give you.
I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
Does that 4.3 million include the month of September or no?
I believe it includes the month of October, and it certainly included September. It included
So
September
That's a cumulative amount of
through
that
September.
basically we've gone into
Right.
through September and now, or through when?
It was through September. Now we have the October actuals, which came in about $150,000, $157,000 lower than we expected.
Okay, and then.
And we're also receiving the credits from OUC for the overbilling that took place. So
Right.
that'll be in October, November, December.
My other question is, when I check natural gas prices all the time, but what I don't have access to, I guess, is what is it called? The basis.
The delivery.
So at one point, it was pretty scary that like something that used to be negligible shot up to being actually significant. And
Yes.
so I'm curious where we're at with that.
The basis has dropped dramatically back to our previous norms. I'll look to my Assistant Director of Power Generation, Brian King.
Okay,
It's back down to less than 25 cents. And I'll also point out that while the basis did spike, we benefited from that on the other side of the ledger, on the other book, which is in our base energy rates. We benefited from that, but to the tune of about $1.2 million, which is helping us reduce or at least defer the timing of the next base rate increase, because we had a $1.2 million gain there. And that had to do with the capacity sales on our gas side, on our pipeline capacity. We were able to sell that and exploit the market difference between the market zone and the FGT zone 1 and zone 2, different points in the pipeline.
Was it announced that the Freeport LNG plant in Texas that blew up, is it reopening soon?
It will reopen. It is not yet reopened.
Okay.
It's delayed a few more months.
Okay. So
The actual dates are pretty tightly, they're very careful about releases because it does move markets, but it appears that it will reopen in the next, I believe, 3 months or so, 3 to 6 months.
So any price change from that won't be, it's not like a stock, it won't be speculation. It has to actually open before it hopefully affects prices.
Well, the price of gas that we incur is the actual price of gas in the market on the day that we need it. It's not based on a future prediction of what it could be. We set our rates based on future predictions, but then we true them up for actual gas prices. What will probably happen when that terminal comes online is that gas that's available in the market, rather than staying in the market and supply and demand, it's going to turn into a liquid and it's going to leave the country. There's no question about it. They're paying 10 times what we would pay for that gas in Europe today.
so then that will probably cause an increase.
That will put
in
some
what we're
upward
paying.
pressure. It's counterbalanced with other things that happen in the market. And for example, it depends on how cold the winter has been or expected to be for the remainder of the winter when that finally comes online, and the relationship of storage. So believe it or not, gas is produced, it comes out of the ground. It's then cleaned, if you will, to some extent, and then it's put into storage for further use down the road. So if the storage volumes are below what the market analysts believe would be necessary to get through the winter, then you could expect the prices to go up. If storage is at historical averages or perhaps better, then that means that prices may not go up as much. So it's a very speculative market. But suffice it to say, we pay the price of gas that day. There are many utilities that hedge with financial instruments. OUC, for example, hedges for their own supply, not for us. That's something we could consider. I know that FMPA for the Oil Requirements Project is hedging. I would prefer to hedge not with financial instruments, but with physical instruments, meaning more solar at the right price is a hedge against it. We need to continue to decrease the amount of our book, if you will, that's natural gas, which is already well below that of many other utilities in the state. and continue to build more solar.
Agreed.
Amen. Well,
Okay,
and add to that, that keep our eyes open as technology changes in storage and have that on when it comes.
And megawatts.
And
Negative.
megawatt.
And the other item I know was interest to the commission, after months of waiting, we did finally get the proposal from the Solar Energy Loan Fund to assist us in our energy conservation efforts with our customers. That proposal was received last week. We'll evaluate it. I recall that this body was of the opinion that that would be funded out of the out of ARPA funds, rather, not penny sales, that's about our ARPA funds. So we'll evaluate that proposal with council and procurement and come back to you and let you decide on how you want to proceed with that. But we think that that's a good way to go. We are doing energy audits now 6 and 7 days a week. Ideally, what we'd like to be able to do is to take the result of the energy audit on a household and turn that over directly to the Solar Energy Loan Fund, assuming, of course, that the resident agrees to have that, so that we can close the time gap between the pain you're feeling with a high energy bill and the solution.
How far backed up are you with that? Like, what's the average wait time now?
As of a few weeks ago, was around 3+ weeks. I'm not sure what it is now that we're ramped up to 7 days a week.
Do we do any, I don't know what you'd call it, follow-up sort of thing, that once people have done an energy audit, that we come back in sometime later and see whether they've made some changes or whether their bills have gone down or?
We haven't had the ability to do that. You know, up until about a year ago, we had 3 auditors. Right now, we have 2, one of which has been on a very serious long-term issue, health-wise. But we can certainly augment that group with contractors, which is what we've done. But we haven't been able to get to that level of sophistication to do a follow-up down the road as to whether they did anything or not.
Or whether it helped them. One thought from what Commissioner Stokes said, or her question about the 4.3 or 4 point something, the back
Cumulative amount?
debt.
Yeah.
If there was some way to do kind of a running graph of, you know, here's where we were before the gas price shot up. We didn't have any debt. Then the gas price went up and our debt went up to whatever it went up to. And now we're whittling our way down after we did the increase, so that the public could follow, hey,
we could certainly do
out
that.
the hole.
I'll point out that it's not debt. We don't have debt on that. It's
Yeah, I wasn't sure what-
it's internal debt between city accounts, for example. So I probably owe the general fund the $4.3 million. To the extent that it exceeds the working capital I have in electric utility, if Bruce were here, he'd probably explain it better. But some of what we can carry within the utility working capital, if we can't, it would come out of the general fund working capital. But I believe it's mostly within the utility right now.
Yeah, the area
Right.
between the curves.
Yeah, we can't use bond funds where it is purely an operating expense. Those bond funds are restricted.
I think anything that we can do to help the public understand, why did the rates go up? Well, because we buy juice from somebody else and their prices went dramatically up. And we've adjusted the rates and now we're making headway to even that back out.
Yeah, I think we made the right decision. We got out ahead of it. We, bill stuffers in the July bill that before the big bills actually came, so people would see it. There was some information on the website, certainly a lot of stuff in the press, which we didn't, drive ourselves. But I think it's occasionally you still have a customer who's not aware of that because they just don't follow the news and follow the details. But we'll continue to provide that. There is a QR code going on to the bills in December. And if customer uses the QR code, I think this was recommended by a member of the advisory board. It will take them to resources to help them find conservation. So I think the QR code that we're using is actually going to the Department of Agriculture website for energy conservation in the state of Florida. And I've been on their website. It's actually pretty cool. There's a lot of good resources there, better than we could create on our own. So we want to provide that link. We want to provide the link to the Energy Star program on our new website. And so the customers will have that. And that'll be augmented, of course, by those bodies who will then provide what tax rebates are available. So one of the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act was it provided a lot of rebates or tax benefits to customers that, frankly, we as a small municipal couldn't provide. They'll be provided to state or rather through the federal government. I'll point out, and I try to say this at meetings, right? I believe it's a sales tax holiday right now for Energy Star appliances. So I believe that's in place till, I believe, May of 2023. So if you go to any of the appliance stores, they probably all have a little flyer on it. Try to focus on the appliances that have those Energy Star labels on them, that yellow tag that predicts the energy use. So, and take advantage of that. And there's also the rebates on your taxes for that.
Yeah, the IRA has a lot of implications.
Right. A lot of which are going to kick in on January 1. So take advantage if you're listing at home or in your business, take advantage of the sales tax holiday on Energy Star appliances and also the tax benefits.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, or can we have a motion to adjourn?
That's, I think everybody wants to
Motion
know.
to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Just for the record, Sarah and I are up at the Florida League of Cities Legislative Conference. It's a conference when all the cities get together. She and I are both on different boards to talk about things that are going to be important to the legislature. I'm on the Economic Development, Land Use, and Mobility is ours. So Sarah's got a different one. So that's why we're here up in Orlando.
I am on municipal issues, and it's funny, I was just going through my packet earlier today, and we are going to be talking about Airbnbs.
There you go.
So on that.
Thank you very much.